You should especially care about due process and habeas corpus if you are innocent of any and all crimes. You should especially care because you want to make sure there is a process to protect people like you.
On Monday, the Supreme Court announced that it was lifting deportation restrictions on 350 Venezuelans living under temporary protected status, a move that the Trump administration considers a win in its plan to remove more than 1 million people from the U.S. Add to these numbers those applying for entry who received instruction in their CBP One app that they should leave immediately, and the 3 million individuals on student visas and green cards. And you've got a lot of people these days who are worried about whether or not they're going to be able to stay in this country. Today at the mics, we've got senior commentator Russell Moore. Hey, Russell.
Hey, Clarissa.
Senior commentator Mike Cosper. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Clarissa.
And America's favorite government teacher. You'll know her from Instagram as Sharon Says So, Sharon McMahon. Hey, Sharon.
Good morning.
Welcome to the show. Sharon, so much of your work is based on social media. When you bring up the subject of deportations, especially these new developments, what are some of the common misconceptions you're seeing?
I think one of the first misconceptions is that everybody who's being removed from the country is a criminal. That is not the case. Some people are not at all criminals, or not even accused of being criminals. And then the second misconception is that the government has done a job that includes fully vetting each person that they are removing and feeling confident that they are removing the correct people. In some cases, that's true. And in some cases, as in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia and others, that has not been true. Some people have been removed by mistake. So I think there's a broad concern that, yes, the immigration system needs to be reformed. There probably are people who need to be sent back to where they came from, but we want to make sure that we're doing it right and we're not arbitrarily imprisoning people in El Salvador who don't deserve to be there.
Mm-hmm. When I think about some of the terms we're seeing in the news media right now, temporary protected status, stay of removal status, asylum, is this a lot of complicated terminology? Is it kind of impossible for the average American to even understand such a complicated system?
The immigration system is extremely complicated. And if you think that just reading a news article gets you up to speed, it sadly does not. And that's one of the reasons why misinformation on these topics spreads so readily, because they are so complicated. And the system is very convoluted. I think a few things that are important to remember. The first thing is it is not illegal to seek asylum in the United States. Asylum is a request for humanitarian entry. I'm facing persecution in my home country. I'm facing a terrible natural disaster, political, religious persecution. It's not illegal to come to the United States to seek asylum. And that's the first thing that people need to understand. We have a system in place to do that. The second thing is temporary protected status is a legal designation that can be given to a person or a group of people that allows them to temporarily remain in the United States because of the situation on the ground in their home country. A great example of the place that this has been used is in Haiti. Most people have at least some passing awareness of how tumultuous the situation is in Haiti and why it would be unsafe for some people to return there. The problem with TPS is that it can be revoked rather easily, and the people do not have any kind of legal ability to remain in the country after their TPS status has been revoked. And I can go into other terms if you need me to, but those are just a few things that you're seeing in the news headlines right now.
This lack of understanding of terminology makes me honestly think about Kristi Noem. On Tuesday, when she was questioned in a Senate hearing, Noem gave this definition of habeas corpus. People don't know what's going on when it comes to immigration. Clearly, the Secretary of Homeland Security can't define the government's process for determining whether or not to detain people. Mike, help me understand. How have we gotten to a place where even the highest officials in our land don't know a core constitutional right?
Well, it's funny when
you first asked Sharon about, the difficulty of terminology, I thought that was where the question was going, was the fact that our Secretary of Homeland Security doesn't know habeas corpus, a legal concept that dates back 800 or so years in the West. The notion of habeas corpus, it literally means something like show me the body. It means, show me the evidence. And the idea of habeas corpus, which is really important to this whole deportation scheme, is the idea that you can't punish someone under the law without showing them the evidence that they've done something wrong. In this case, you can't kick somebody out of the country without showing before a court or before a magistrate of some sort that there's a reason that they're not supposed to be here. And look, how have we gotten to this moment? I think there's a lot of reasons we got to this moment. I think the reason that Kristi Noem has gotten into the role that she is in is not because of her expertise in the law, expertise in the policy around any of this, or her international relations, or her experience with things like border control and security and counterterrorism or anything like that. She got in this role to do exactly what she has done, which is big, loud, performative gestures on behalf of the Trump administration to sort of prove to the base that she is carrying out his campaign promises of kicking undocumented persons out of the country. This is a made-for-television spectacle. The whole thing has been a made-for-television spectacle from the very beginning, and I think there's a couple of reasons for it. One is, if you understand who Stephen Miller is, this is one of Trump's closest advisors. All of this is stuff that Miller has talked about for a long time: denial of habeas corpus, denial of due process, expedited deportations for persons that are here in an undocumented way. But the other side of this that I think is really important to keep in mind when you understand, when you see how it's happening and the extremism of how it's happening, and again the spectacle of it, a big part of this is about deterrence, and it's about this idea of self-deportation. We're going to do these big, loud, scary things. We're going to throw a bunch of people in a Central American gulag, and we're going to say, hey, if you don't want this to happen to you, get out now or don't come here in the first place. And that's what the theater is all for. And again, it's policy, it's planned, it's intentional.
Does the Constitution actually say that we can suspend habeas corpus when there's an invasion? Because I know that has been part of the argumentation towards some of these recent moves.
Well, the Constitution does give very specific criteria about when habeas corpus can be suspended. It needs to be suspended, not just by the president, though. It requires congressional approval to suspend habeas corpus. That's something that's important to remember. Unlike what Kristi Noem said, habeas corpus is not the ability of the president to kick people out of the country. It's what Mike just said. It's the right to be informed of the charges against you, to be seen by a judge, or have a legal proceeding. So there is the ability to suspend habeas corpus, but that has, since the country's inception, been understood to mean an invasion of a foreign country's army. And not a whole bunch of individuals acting independently. That has never been what an invasion was understood to mean. If you think about when the Constitution was written in 1787, what were all of the colonists doing in America? They had all just arrived independently, right? Like that was, there's no sense that there would have, that is how they would have defined invasion. The entire North American continent was settled by Europeans who just arrived. So of course, we're ignoring the fact that there were already people here as well. But it has always been understood to mean the army of France attacks the army of England. Or, some kind of international conflict between two official armies that are being directed by the leaders of those countries. So this really does hinge, as Mike was pointing out, on the definition of the word invasion. Stephen Miller wants people to believe that invasion means a whole bunch of people arrived, even if they arrived independently. Millions and millions and millions of people have arrived in the United States from overseas. Nearly everyone has descended from one of those people. So that has never been legally what the meaning has been. But there's an effort to recast the meaning of invasion to mean people we don't want from Central America are coming. They're coming here in too high a number. That's what they are trying to make us believe that it means.
Russell, this week, 8 men were deported to South Sudan. And when you and I hear South Sudan on this show, our thoughts immediately go to those who are fleeing war there, refugees, Christians in conflict. But the Economic Times reported that these men were actually convicted of murder, armed robbery, rape, sexual assault, and that they were from Cuba, they were from Myanmar, from Vietnam, and South Sudan. What's the issue with getting individuals with records like this out of our country? It seems it would be a good thing.
It's a good thing if there is a process, as we've been talking about. And the argument that, well, people who are not here legally aren't owed due process sounds really right. You hear that and you say, well, yeah, somebody who's not an American doesn't have the rights guaranteed to Americans. Yes, they do, because what due process means is that there is a way to determine whether, without due process, the government could say you're here illegally and we'll just sort out later whether you're a citizen or not, or whether you're here legally or not. That's what due process is. And so in many cases, you're going to see people who, should be out of the country, should be in jail, but the way they're getting there is really, really dangerous for people who aren't criminals and for the rest of us long term.
And to follow up with that, Russell, is it so wrong for them to be sent to a country like South Sudan or to El Salvador for when they're extradited?
Yeah, because if you think of what the process typically is to send people back to their home country. So if somebody is evading justice in Mexico, they go back to Mexico where they're going to face the legal system. In El Salvador, what you have is this amorphous for-profit prison system where people are simply gone. And one of the things that we've seen is that the administration is now able to say, well, we don't know what happened to those people. We once they're in El Salvador, we don't have any responsibility for them at all. That is really dangerous. And that's especially true when the conditions in a place like that are what we know them to be.
The reason we all have to care about due process is it seems easy, like Russell said, to be like, yeah, you don't deserve due process if you're not an American. What he's saying is correct, that the Constitution applies to all people within the jurisdiction of the United States. It does not just apply to citizens. The language of the Constitution is actually pretty plain about that. But it's easy for us to think, I'm in the country legally. I don't have anything to worry about. I was born here. You should especially care about due process and habeas corpus if you are innocent of any and all crimes. You should especially care because you want to make sure there is a process to protect people like you. The power that is used against other people can be wielded against you just as easily. So the reason we have to care about the process is to protect you as much as it protects everybody else. When we have equality under the law, that means you are protected as well as other people. So if you are innocent, you want due process even more than somebody who is has actually committed a crime.
You just answered the question that I was going to ask. So wonderful.
Well, and if I can tag on that as well, I think part of what's so disturbing about this is not just what's happened so far, which is a violation of the letter of the law and a violation of human rights and on its own right, but it's also a trajectory, because along with this, you're hearing talk about ending birthright citizenship, revoking the legal status of people who are here, people who've gone through a process and are here legally, ending ending refugee programs for people who've been in the process. Part of what this will end up doing is it's going to end up creating a population of stateless people who can't go home, have no protection in their own homes, and people who have no protection, who were counting on protection in the U.S. because U.S. policy had guaranteed it, or they'd gone through a process and received that protection. And I mean, one of the ugly facts of the last 150 years of history is that when people become stateless, they become incredibly vulnerable to all kinds of violence and brutality. Like how do you put people in concentration camps, whether it's in the early 20th century or in China or in North Korea today? Statelessness is a part of the process. You start by saying, these people aren't citizens, they have no rights. What are we going to do with them now? Well, we've got to go put them all someplace. And again, this all feels like it feels like a familiar trajectory, with potentially horrific outcomes for human rights and for the lives of these individuals.
I talked with Marvin Olasky and Andy Olson, who are reporters here at CT who have been following this topic really closely for us. And listeners, I commend to you their excellent reporting. They told me that the number of deportations at the moment is only slightly higher than it had been during the end of President Biden's term, but the number of immigrant detentions has soared. And Sharon, I wonder, this math doesn't seem sustainable. How would you respond to the person who says, don't get your dander up, this is going to all slow down at some point? There's no way to have all of these individuals locked up forever in detainment facilities.
Well, Guantanamo Bay is an example of that not being true, right? Like we have been imprisoning people in Guantanamo Bay since 2001. People who have not been charged of any crime. And that's not to say that none of those individuals are dangerous or that they should not have been imprisoned. But the idea that we can't imprison people forever, that's not borne out by any kind of facts. There are line items in the current budget that is working its way through Congress, what Trump refers to as the big beautiful bill, that increase spending for ICE detention facilities. The plan is to build more detention facilities so that we can, and I've written about this, that mass deportation begins with mass incarceration, that we have to, in order to facilitate the types of deportations that the administration is looking to facilitate, they have to first begin massively incarcerating people. But your reporters are also correct that the current pace of deportations is not anywhere on target to where the numbers that the administration has said they want to be. During the most recent, campaign, they talked about wanting to deport 15 to 20 million people, which is not supported by the actual facts of the number of people who are estimated to be in the country without documentation. But even if you were to remove every single person who is in the country without documentation, you would need to be moving at a much faster pace than we're currently seeing. We're not even currently on track to deport 1 million people this year. Which is, like the most recent revised number of we're going to deport 1 million people. We're not on track to do that either. But the point is that the ability to detain people indefinitely is something the United States is uniquely good at in the world. The percentage of people who are incarcerated in the United States per capita is one of the highest in the world. It's certainly one of the highest in the developed world. So the idea that it can all shake out, I'll give you one other fact. The current wait time to get an initial hearing in a U.S. immigration court to come into the United States to seek asylum or to seek a certain type of visa, depending on the type of visa or asylum claim you might be requesting, the current wait time can be close to 10 years for an initial hearing. That is not hyperbolic. That's not an outlier. Those are the stated wait times, average wait times by the United States government for initial hearings. So that is like, if you have to wait 9 to 10 years to get an initial hearing, that lays bare the current challenges that we have with our immigration system, which badly needs reform. Nobody who knows anything about immigration disagrees with that statement. It badly needs to be reformed. And we need to do some very significant capacity building when it comes to our immigration court system to be able to legally follow the letter of the law and provide people with their things that they are legally entitled to.
You know, we have talked about the ICE tactic of showing up at churches, Russell. These ICE raids are really becoming TV and sort of social media fodder in many ways, like watching a sick version of cops. ICE agents have been showing up in plain clothes. Some of them have pretended to be other characters and then sort of did a costume switch. Some of their arrests have been very violent. Here in the Boston area where I live, ICE agents smashed the windows of a car to get to a man who was headed to a dentist appointment. Now that everybody has a cell phone and everything has the potential to go online as a reel, do you think we're going to see backlash to these kind of moments like we saw with police brutality 5 years ago after George Floyd's death? Could there be a possibility that there is a reform, as Sharon talks about, that's actually initiated by individuals who are seeing these raids on social media?
I do, and I think that the reason we're going to see that probably will not be so much because of the actual constitutional kinds of violations as the cosplay itself. Having ICE agents in masks and wearing what looks to be military attire, it sends a performative sort of signal to people who want mass deportations, but it also does not fit with an American sense of what it means to be an American. And I think the more that those images are out there, the more people are going to ask, what's really going on here? And I mean, I saw a Catholic diocese that I know that sent out directions to people saying you're not obligated to come to Mass physically if you're afraid to. I mean, these are the kinds of things we never would have seen before in American life. And there's almost like a tissue rejection at the intuition level of Americans to say that's the kind of thing that happens in other places, but that's not the way we do things here.
Do you see those kind of responses, Sharon, in the conversations that you have online and through the preamble?
I do think that the idea that that ICE agents who, as Russell mentioned, are often masked, wearing all black, which is very much a performative signal of men in hoods will come snatch you off the street. They'll come to your school and grab your children. They'll come to your church and they will, or your place of business. There was a situation in the town where I live. I live in northern Minnesota, where people were working on a roofing project and ICE just rolled up to the roofing project, arrested all of the workers. Almost all of them were in the country legally. But the idea that, masked men will just show up, I do think it harkens back to extrajudicial law enforcement that we saw during the rise of the KKK. The idea that men will just show up wherever you are and commit acts of violence against you with no ability to access due process. That is antithetical to the American way. That is un-American, just point blank. It is un-American. And if we don't want to empower militia groups like the KKK, like other, that's a whole separate issue. But if we don't want to empower that kind of extrajudicial, law enforcement, air quotes, law enforcement, we need to make sure that we are playing by the rules. If we don't play by the rules, why would we expect other people to play by the rules? That is just human psychology 101. We have to play by the rules. We have to ensure that we are avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. Right? Like this is also just institution building 101, whether it's a faith institution or a government institution. You don't pretend or act like you're stealing money or you're doing things under the table or you're having inappropriate relationships. It is important to give the appearance of propriety at all times. So we have to make sure that we are not just playing by the rules, but making it look like we're playing by the rules as well, so that other people will do the same.
As we close, Mike, the Center for the Study of Global Christianity at Gordon Conwell Seminary found that 75% of immigrants at risk of being deported due to either being undocumented or having a legal status that the Trump administration could revoke are Christians. And I was shocked that the number was that high, 75%. Do American Christians just not know this, or do we not care? And how do we move that needle?
Well, I think the answer is both, unfortunately. I think that there's a segment of the church that is, look, as someone who works in journalism, I wish people paid closer attention to the news and cared about what was going on and attended to it at a finer level of detail. But a lot of people do stay tuned out on this. And I think unfortunately they also take their political leaders at face value when they say, we're getting rid of criminals. We're getting rid of people who are here illegally and getting rid of criminals. And they're not attending to the fine print that says, oh, by the way, we accidentally deported a gay hairdresser and he's lost in a Central American gulag, even though he was here illegally and all of that. Like that stuff gets lost. Particularly, number one, people aren't paying attention. Number two, our media environments are so siloed that if you're tuning in, when you do tune into media, if you're tuning into certain streams of conservative media, you simply won't hear those stories. You won't hear where the administration has gotten things wrong and where people have been hurt. But I think the second side of it is this element of not caring. Look, we live in a moment of like intense grievance politics. And when people are feeling, whether it's economic frustration, whether it's frustration over culture wars and other tensions, there's this sense that, what politicians have done, and I think you can look particularly to people like Trump and Vance. A lot of what they've done is they've said, the world's laughing at you, and you're getting screwed, and you're unhappy, and your kids are unhappy, and you're so everything is up against you, and I'm going to go fight for you and push back against this, and I'm going to do that by pushing it back against the left and by pushing back against criminals and people who are here illegally and people who are trying to take away your country. And when you tap into that kind of grievance, it's incredibly animating. And I think for a lot of Christians, unfortunately, it has kind of trumped their own, pardon the pun, but it's kind of trumped their own Christian impulses to have concern for their neighbor, to have concern for, to have concerns for people who are here seeking refuge and are fleeing real violence and danger. Again, that's not to say that concerns about people who are here illegally and committing crimes and doing those sorts of things, we shouldn't have concerns about all of that. We absolutely should. But we also have policies and laws that can be enforced that allow the government to do that. This is something else entirely. And I think we should be very, very concerned about where this leads.
Well, Sharon, Russell, Mike, thanks so much for this conversation. Listeners, will put a link to Sharon's newsletter, The Preamble, and Andy Olson's reporting on immigration over at our Substack so that you can learn more, not only about your government, but what they're up to. Subscribe to get all the good stuff at thebulletinpodcast.substack.com. Listen to the full episode wherever podcasts are found.